Chapter 7. Brent threw on his nicest shirt, wishing his bag contained something a little dressier for church. Of course, he hadn't planned on attending church this trip, but he hadn't planned on meeting a girl like Sam either. It was too bad confusion overshadowed the enjoyable activities of the previous day. The strong urge to kiss Sam had plagued him the entire day, but every time the opportunity arose, she pulled away. Was she hung up on him being from the city? Was it his money? Or did the fact he'd be leaving tomorrow play more of a role? Long-distance relationships proved challenging, but Sam was special. Brent would try dating if she'd be open to it, but he wasn't sure of her feelings. When they had returned to her place, he had locked himself in his room, determined to write through the confusion. Words had appeared, but the confusion hadn't left. The story was coming along well, though, and if nothing else, he was thankful for the inspiration. "You look nice." Sam handed Brent a mug of coffee as he entered the kitchen. "2 sugars. That's the way you drink it, right?" His heart tightened at the familiar gesture. Sam knew his preferences already, and he could picture similar breakfasts in the future. But perhaps this was merely hospitality. Brent wished, for the first time in years, he found women easier to read. "Thank you." "So, I wanted to talk about yesterday." Sam sat at the table, her eyes focused on the mug in her hands as if it was a lifeline. "I enjoyed the time with you." Brent sat across from her, wondering what else was coming. "I did too." She paused for a moment, twirling the mug in circles. "But I wanted to explain myself. I think you're great, and I had a wonderful time." His smile faltered at her words. He could hear the but coming. "But you'll be leaving tomorrow, and I don't know if we should start something that probably won't last." She sneaked a glance at him through lowered lids. There it was. Brent's heart dropped to his feet, though he agreed her words made sense. "Yeah, you're probably right. I'll return to Houston soon, and I travel a lot for work. And your life is here." "Exactly." But her words fell flat, and he wondered if she really meant them, or if she was trying to convince herself. "Of course, I could fly out to see you, or fly you to wherever I am. I have the money, Sam." A spark of hope flickered in her eyes for a moment before disappearing. "But how long would that last, Brent?" As long as it needed to was what he wanted to say, but he could see her wall was back up. There would be no convincing her now. "Come on." She stood and placed her mug in the sink. "We need to head out to make it to church on time." During the quiet ride to church, Brent searched for something to say to lighten the mood, but nothing came to mind. Sam pulled into a parking space, and the two headed into the white church. "Good morning." A plump older woman with graying hair smiled at them as they walked in the door. "Good morning, Tina." Sam leaned in to hug the elder woman. "This is my friend, Brent McKasson. He's visiting for the weekend. Brent, this is Tina, the pastor's wife." "Good to meet you, Brent. I hope you enjoy the service." Brent nodded and grabbed the paper she held out. He glanced at it as he followed Sam into the sanctuary. It was a bulletin listing the upcoming events and notes for the day's sermon. Sam chose a seat near the middle, and Brent sat beside her. A few people wandered over and introduced themselves, but Brent's mind remained on the woman to his left. Agreeing to be friends was one thing, but sitting next to her and smelling her sweet scent presented a whole new issue. When the pastor spoke, Brent tried to keep focused on the sermon, but images of Sam kept flooding his mind. He wanted to experience her lips against his own. Before he realized it, the sermon ended. The only thing he could recall was something about God's timing. Was that what he needed to do? Did he need to wait on God's timing? It had been so long since he'd spoken with God that he felt rusty. But when the pastor closed the service with a final prayer, he asked God for clarity and peace. "Want to get some lunch?" Sam asked, touching his arm. Brent opened his eyes and nodded. "Sure, sounds good." "Marnie's is close, and they have good food." Sam led the way across the street. Marnie's was a small casual restaurant, similar to Norma's though a bit larger. A young, perky blonde met them as they entered. "Welcome to Marnie's on Madison. I'm Becky, and I'll be your waitress today. Just the two of you?" Brent blinked at the sheer speed the words had exited the woman's mouth. "Yes, just the two of us," Sam said. "Follow me." The girl turned and led them to a back booth. She placed 2 menus down and took their drink order before leaving them. "So, don't get me wrong," Brent began, as he looked around the homey interior of the small place. "But does this town have any elegant restaurants? I mean, if I wanted to take a date somewhere..." He paused, searching for the right word. "Classier?" Sam smiled at him from across the table. "Are you letting your inner snob surface, Brent McKasson?" "No, it's just that this doesn't have a date-like atmosphere. Surely this town has at least one date-night restaurant." "That would be Ernesto's. It's an upscale Italian place, but other than that, you'd probably have to drive to one of the bigger towns." Brent filed the information away in case the opportunity arose in the future. "I'm sorry, I couldn't help overhearing. Are you the Brent McKasson, the movie star?" The voice belonged to a pretty redhead in a yellow summer dress. "I am," Brent said. The woman's eyes lit up with excitement. "Do you think I could bother you for an autograph and a picture? I'm a huge fan." Brent glanced to Sam, who shrugged and waved her hand in a go-ahead gesture. "Sure." Brent looked back to the woman. "Do you have something to write with?" The woman placed a napkin and a pen on the tabletop in front of him. "Can you make it out to Sandy?" Brent smiled and shook his head slightly. Signing a napkin wasn't a first for him, but he always wondered what people did with them. Did they really keep them? Frame them on the wall? He scribbled the pen across the surface and then pushed it back to her. "Can you take a picture of us?" Sandy turned to Sam for the first time, the hopeful question dancing in her eyes. "Sure." Sam took the camera. Brent couldn't tell if the smirk on her face was from amusement or irritation. Sandy leaned in, a little too close for Brent's comfort, and Sam tapped the phone. "Okay, here you go." "Thank you." Sandy once again focused her attention solely on Brent. "You're welcome." "I don't think I'd enjoy that, the constant interruption." Sam shook her head as Sandy spun and walked away. "You get used to it," Brent said. Becky returned then and took their order, and then a silence fell. "So, have you always wanted to be a mechanic?" Brent asked. "Yeah, but a small shop like I have now wasn't really my goal. I had a much bigger shop when I lived in Dallas." "So why'd you leave it?" Brent asked. Sam shook her head. "That's a long story. Let's just say there was a guy involved." Brent was curious for more information, but it was obvious from Sam's demeanor that the subject was closed. For now, at least. After lunch, they returned to Sam's place. Though he wanted to take her in his arms, He retired to the spare room to work more on his story. He feared too much time around her would make him unable to honor her request to remain just friends.